What if the truth you spent your whole life searching for was the same truth that could destroy everyone you ever loved? In a quiet village where memories are buried deeper than graves, an old woman returns 210 million she never claimed as hers. But instead of honor, she is accused of hiding what cannot be seen, a secret her father died protecting, and a past the world was never meant to remember. When a red thread appears on the ground, moving on its own, everyone realizes the danger did not begin today. It began years ago. And now, the one who carries a memory must make a choice, not to save herself, but to save everyone else. This is a story that makes you question, what is more dangerous, knowing the truth or being the one chosen to carry it? Her feet were slow, her back slightly hunched, but her eyes held the steady clarity of someone who had learned to survive through storms harsher than weather. She carried her cloth bag against her chest as though it contained something precious, though inside it were only vegetables and a few bundles of herbs she would dry later at home. On the side of the quiet road, she saw the suitcase, black, heavy, and almost out of place in a place where most people still walk barefoot on dirt. At first, she thought someone might return for it, so she stood watching it for several minutes while rain soaked her thin shawl. But no one came, only the sound of water hitting leaves and earth. With effort, she dragged it home. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from age. Inside her small wooden house, she opened the suitcase, bundles of cash, more than she could count with her slow fingers. The smell of crisp paper and dust filled the room. She pressed her palm to her chest as her heart beat faster, but her mind stayed clear. This was not hers. This was someone's loss, and she would not let it become her sin. The next morning, she walked to the district police office. The officers stared when she placed the suitcase on the desk. Some whispered to each other. Others looked at her as though she were mad. The count took hours. They said it totaled 210 million. Word spread faster than wind. Villagers came to stare at her house. Some praised her. Some mocked her. Many simply watched, waiting to see what would happen. The owner came 2 days later. A man in a finely pressed suit, with shoes too shiny for this dusty place. He thanked her in a calm voice that seemed rehearsed. His eyes did not hold gratitude, only calculation. Then the accusation came. He claimed that when he lost the suitcase, there had been 310 million inside. He said she must have taken the missing 100 million for herself. His voice echoed through the police office, loud and polished with authority. May Rinna's knees weakened, not from guilt, from disbelief. The villagers who once praised her now whispered differently. Eyes that were warm yesterday became sharp and suspicious. Her small wooden house felt smaller. Even the walls seemed to lean away from her. She tried to speak. Her voice shook. She said she had returned everything. Every single note. Every single bundle. But the air in the room felt heavy with doubt. The officers turned to the man in the suit. He stood with his hands clasped neatly in front of him, a faint smile forming at the corner of his mouth. Not the smile of someone wronged, but the smile of someone who knew the outcome before any words were spoken. May Rinna looked into his eyes. And in that quiet moment, she understood something. Something dark. Something terrifying. This was not about missing money. This was about something else. Something that reached beyond her, beyond this town, beyond the police office walls. The weight of the truth pressed down on her chest. Not because she could see it fully, but because she could feel its shape forming. A truth that could swallow her whole. Outside, the rain began again. Slow, steady, as though the sky itself knew what was coming. And the story did not end there. It was only the beginning of something that would shake every quiet corner of the town and expose secrets that were never meant to see daylight. The officers asked May Rinna to remain in the station for further questioning. She sat on a metal chair that felt cold even through her thin skirt. The air smelled of old paper and stale coffee. A single ceiling fan turned slowly above her, making a faint clicking sound with every rotation. Her hands rested on her knees, palms open, as if to show the world she held nothing. The man in the suit stood across from her. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, as though he were in his own living room. His eyes remained fixed on her, observing, studying, measuring every flicker in her expression. No one else in the room seemed to notice the strange weight of his gaze. A senior officer entered and placed a folder on the desk. He spoke calmly, almost politely, as he explained the accusation again. The tone suggested a decision already made. May Rinna answered each question with steady clarity. Her voice was soft but unwavering. She told him how she found the suitcase. She told him she counted nothing, took nothing. She told him the money had been untouched. But the eyes around her no longer saw a woman of honesty. They saw a crime waiting to be confirmed. The man in the suit leaned in slightly, his voice gentle. He said he did not want trouble. He said he simply wanted what was his. He asked her where the missing amount was. There was something chilling about the way he asked, as if he knew that she did not have it, as if the accusation was not a question at all, but a message. May Rinna felt a slow coldness creep into her spine. A memory surfaced, uninvited. Years ago, in this very region, there had been whispers of men who moved money in silence. Money that did not belong to banks. Money that did not belong to any rightful owner. Money tied to disappearances that no one could speak of with a name. She raised her eyes to meet his. He did not blink. The officers called for an official count verification. The room filled with low voices, shuffling papers, calculator machines, striking their keys. Each sound echoed like footsteps in a hallway leading somewhere unseen. Outside, villagers had begun to gather near the entrance of the station. Some came out of curiosity. Some came to judge. Some came simply to watch something unfold that did not belong to their own lives. An old neighbor of May Rinna's stood among them. Her name was Dara. She had known May Rinna since childhood. She looked at May Rinna through the glass window with uncertainty, as though she no longer recognized the woman she once shared meals with. That moment hurt more than any accusation. Hours passed. The official count confirmed the amount. 210 million. Not a single note missing. Yet the man in the suit did not react with relief. Instead, his smile returned. Slow, measured, controlled. He requested that the verification be done again. He said there must be another error. His voice held authority that did not come from law, but from something older and more rooted in fear. The officers hesitated. That hesitation told May Rinna everything. The power in the room did not belong to truth. It belonged to influence, connections, money that could not be spoken of in daylight. One of the younger officers, who had been silent all day, glanced at May Rinna. There was something in his expression, a flicker of knowledge, a warning, a quiet plea for her to understand something she had not yet seen. The second count was scheduled for the next morning. May Rinna was allowed to return home. As she walked back through the dim evening, shadows stretched long across the dirt road. She felt watched, not by the villagers, not by the police, but by something that had already woven itself into her fate the moment she lifted that suitcase from the wet roadside. Her gate creaked as she pushed it open. The house felt unnaturally silent. Even the night insects seemed to hold their breath. On her table, where she had opened the suitcase days before, she saw something placed neatly. A single piece of paper. She had locked her door before leaving. No one should have been inside. She walked slowly toward it. The paper had only one sentence, written in very neat handwriting. You should have left it where it was. Her heart did not race. Her breath did not quicken. Instead, a heavy calm settled inside her, a realization that the situation was not a matter of law, nor morality, nor public opinion. Something larger was now watching her. Outside, footsteps moved in the darkness just beyond the gate. Slow, deliberate, not approaching, simply waiting. The night held its silence tightly, and May Rinna stood alone in her small wooden house, with the weight of knowledge pressing against her chest. As the unseen eyes continued to watch, May Rinna did not move for a long moment. She stood in the quiet of her house, the air so still it felt as if time itself had paused to observe her. Her fingertips brushed the paper only once, lightly, as though it might burn her skin. The message held a weight far heavier than the ink that formed its words. She folded it and placed it inside the drawer beneath her old wooden altar, the one she used to light incense for her ancestors. Her hands were steady, her breathing slow, yet her eyes, once gentle, now carried a watchful sharpness. She barred the doors before night fully settled, not out of fear, but to gather her thoughts. The world outside her home had shifted. That much was clear. The next day, news spread across the town like wildfire. Whispers wound through tea shops, market stalls, bus stops, temple steps. Some said she hid the missing money. Others said the owner was part of something dangerous. And a few, only a very few, said nothing at all because silence was safer than curiosity. May Rinna walked to the police station again. The villagers watched her pass. Some stepped back, as if misfortune were contagious. Some stared openly, trying to read guilt or innocence in her posture. She did not bow her head. She did not speed her steps. She simply walked. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. No one met her eyes, not even the young officer who had looked at her with warning the day before. The second count began. This time, the money was handled behind a closed door. The officers prevented her from being present. They said it was procedure, but she knew what it truly meant. She stood in the corridor alone. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly above her, buzzing with a low, restless sound. She could hear murmurs through the walls, but not the words. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her shawl. Hours passed. No one called her inside. Finally, the door opened. The senior officer stepped out. His face held no expression at all. His voice was flat when he spoke. He said the second count showed the same result. 210 million. No discrepancy. No missing portion. May Rinna felt a brief warmth of relief in her chest, but it vanished the moment she saw the man in the suit behind the officer. His smile remained, but it had changed. It was no longer the smile of accusation. It was the smile of someone waiting. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He only said that mistakes could happen. He said he would not request a third count. The officers relaxed slightly. Some even offered small nods, believing the matter was over. But May Rinna knew this was not an ending. This was permission. Permission for the next part of whatever story she had unknowingly stepped into. As she prepared to leave the station, the young officer approached her quietly. His steps were careful, as though sound itself might betray him. He slipped a small folded note into her hand without looking at her, then walked away immediately. May Rinna did not open the note until she was alone on the path home, where the tall grass swayed beside the road, hiding the earth beneath. She unfolded it slowly. The message was short. Do not stay in your house tonight. Her pulse remained calm, her breath steady. But the world around her felt suddenly sharpened, like blades hidden beneath leaves. The sun was beginning to set, staining the horizon in shades of deep orange and fading gold. The shadows stretched longer, reaching toward her feet. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain from somewhere distant. She walked past her own home. She did not look at the windows. She did not look at the gate. She simply continued walking toward the old part of town, where houses were worn with time and silence, and where fewer eyes cared to watch. She reached a small abandoned shrine, overgrown with vines. She sat on the stone steps, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders, the night slowly closing around her. Somewhere far behind her, back toward her home, she heard a sound, not loud, not sudden, but unmistakable. A door opening, a floorboard shifting. Not footsteps of someone entering, footsteps of someone already inside. May Rinna did not turn. She kept her gaze fixed on the mountains beyond the village, where the sky darkened into deep night, and the story continued to move forward unseen, each thread tightening, each truth drawing closer. But what came next, no one in the village was ready to speak of. Not yet. May Rinna remained seated on the stone steps of the abandoned shrine. The night deepened around her, thick and quiet, the kind of silence that does not simply fall but settles and anchors itself into bones of everything it touches. The moon was only a thin sliver, hardly enough light to see her own hands, yet she kept her gaze forward, never turning back toward the village. She knew someone was in her house, not searching, waiting. There was a difference. The wind shifted through the trees, carrying the faint sound of distant voices from the village. The world continued living its ordinary life, unaware that something had begun moving beneath its calm surface. May Rinna listened to the forest and the space between her heartbeats. Fear did not rush inside her. Instead, there was a stillness, a quiet sense of something she had not felt in years. The old instincts of survival. She stayed at the shrine until the first light of dawn painted the sky in muted gray. Only then did she stand and walk slowly toward the market street, her movements deliberate, unhurried. She knew that going back home would be a mistake. For now, she found shelter in the back room of an old herbal shop owned by a man named Arun, someone who rarely spoke more than necessary. He did not ask why she was there. He did not look at her with pity or suspicion. He simply boiled water for tea and placed a cup in front of her. The steam rose quietly between them. She wrapped her hands around the warm clay cup, letting the heat seep into her fingers. Arun's eyes remained lower to the table, yet something in his silence suggested understanding, not of details, but of danger. When she finished her tea, he only said one thing, a single sentence. People do not accuse without reason, but sometimes the reason is not spoken. It was not comfort. It was truth. Later that morning, the quiet town began to feel strangely heavy. More police vehicles were seen than usual. Strangers walked the markets pretending to browse, yet their eyes scanned faces instead of goods. Villagers whispered, but no one knew the full shape of the story. The man in the suit had not left town. His presence lingered like a shadow that fell across every conversation. He walked with slow certainty, as though he already owned the ground he stepped on. Meanwhile, May Rinna watched everything from a distance. She did not hide, but she did not reveal herself either. She observed how the pattern of the town shifted, how certain houses closed their doors early, how certain people avoided eye contact, how the young officer who warned her no longer wore his uniform and had not been seen since dawn. By afternoon, the villagers gathered at the temple courtyard for their daily offerings. May Rinna joined them quietly. Some eyes widened at the sight of her, but no one spoke. They followed her movements with the silent curiosity of people watching a storm form far away, unsure if it will reach them or spare them. As she lit a stick of incense, she felt a presence beside her. A soft voice spoke, without turning toward her. "You are being used as a lesson." The speaker was an elderly monk, a man known for rarely speaking at all. His face held the calm of water that has known many storms. May Rinna answered without lifting her gaze from the incense flame. "And what lesson is that?" The monk's reply was quiet. "That truth does not matter when fear is a teacher." The words settled into her mind like stones dropped into deep water, sinking slowly, without ripple. When the offerings were finished, people began to disperse. The sky had grown overcast, the scent of rain returning. May Rinna walked along the temple's outer wall, her steps rhythmic, thoughtful. Then she noticed something. A white car parked in the distance near the old trees. Its windows were tinted, the engine still running. Someone was inside, watching her, not moving, just watching. The same feeling she felt the night before returned. Not fear, recognition. Something was unraveling, and she was no longer simply a person inside it. She was now the thread being pulled. She stopped walking. She did not look away. She let the watcher know she saw them. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The car door opened. A figure stepped out. Not the man in the suit. Someone different. Face unfamiliar. But the stillness around him was the same. He approached slowly, without hurry, without hesitation. And when he stopped a few steps away, he spoke with a calm voice that carried no threat, yet left no room for disobedience. "You must come with us now." The world around them continued unaffected. Birds called. Children laughed in the distance. A vendor shouted prices at the market. Nothing looked unusual. Yet May Rinna knew this moment marked the crossing of a line from which there would be no return. She did not answer right away. She studied his face, searching for something, a sign of intent, a measure of time, a door that could still be walked through, but his expression revealed nothing. The air seemed to tighten, and just before she could speak, a sound echoed from behind the temple, soft at first, then louder, running footsteps, someone approaching. Someone who had chosen this exact moment. And the story paused there, suspended in the space of a breath, with everything about it break open, yet not a single soul knowing how, or when, or who would still remain once the truth finally stepped into the light. The footsteps from behind the temple were rushed, uneven, like someone running not from urgency alone, but from fear. Rinna turned slightly, enough to see the young officer who had warned her the previous day. His uniform was gone. His hair was disheveled. He looked as though he had not slept. His hands trembled, yet his eyes were fierce with decision already made. He stopped a short distance from her, breathing hard, trying to steady his voice. "You cannot go with them," he said. He did not raise his tone, but every word seemed carved from something raw and unbreakable. The man in the plain clothing did not react with surprise. He only turned his head slowly to look at the young officer, as though examining an insect that had crawled into view. The silence between them felt like a space where something ancient had settled, something that had shaped the town long before any of them were born. The young officer stepped closer to Rinna, placing himself slightly in front of her, not in a gesture of protection alone, but of alignment, a statement of where he now stood. He spoke again, his voice lower. "They want you silent." The accusation was never meant to hold. It was meant to remove you. Rinna felt the weight of his words. Not heavy, but clarifying, like dust clearing from glass. The man who had approached her finally spoke. His tone was calm, steady, patient. "Return to your home, grandmother. There is no need for further trouble. You will remain there until we decide the next step. There will be no harm if you do not make this difficult." His politeness was more chilling than anger would have been. Kindness used as a leash. Rinna looked at both men. The young officer breathing hard, urgency burning in him like fire. The stranger standing still, control settling around him like an iron cage. And she realized something. The conflict here was not about her. Not truly. She had simply stepped on a path already buried in the soil, one that connected money, silence, and power in ways the village had never spoken aloud. The young officer leaned closer to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "There were people following the suitcase before you found it. They were watching the road. They saw you take it. They waited to see what you would do. You returned it. That ruined their plan. It changed something higher than any of us." Rinna listened without blinking. The stranger did not stop him. He only watched, as if the outcome had already been decided no matter what words were spoken. The young officer took a slow breath, gathering whatever courage remained inside him. "Someone else came for the money before you brought it to the police. That is the missing amount. You did not take it. I know who did, and if I speak his name, this entire town will burn." His voice cracked then, not from weakness, but from the weight of truth pressing against his ribs. The wind shifted. Clouds gathered overhead. The air held the dense, breathless stillness before rain. Rinna finally spoke. "Then why tell me now?" Her voice was not shaken or afraid. It was calm, firm, with a quiet strength that had been forged through a lifetime of enduring storms. The young officer swallowed, his throat tight. "Because they will not let you live quietly now. Not after what you returned. Not after what you know." The stranger took one step forward. Not fast, not threatening, just final. "We are leaving now." A raindrop struck the dust at their feet. Then another. Then the sky opened in a steady, unbroken curtain of rain. The temple courtyard emptied as villagers ran for shelter. Yet the three of them remained standing in the downpour, unmoving, as if the rain itself was part of the moment. Rinna lifted her gaze to the stranger again, her eyes clear, unbroken. "What will happen if I refuse?" The stranger's answer was so soft she barely heard it through the rainfall. "The same thing that already waits inside your house." The young officer stiffened. His breath caught. His hand moved slightly toward his coat, reaching for something no longer there. Rinna did not blink. The rain poured harder, washing dust into rivulets, turning the earth to slick mud. And then, from a road leading into the village, another presence appeared. A vehicle, black, unmarked, moving slowly. No sound of urgency. No sirens. Just inevitability. The villagers watched from behind door frames. They did not come closer. No one interfered. Their silence was the loudest sound in the rain-soaked streets. May Rinna stood between the man urging her to leave and the young officer urging her to run. Two paths, two futures, both dangerous, both already in motion. The vehicle came to a stop. The door opened. Someone stepped out. Someone everyone in the village knew. Someone no one ever expected to see here. The rain paused in its meaning. The world held still, and the truth that had been buried beneath years of quiet living finally began to rise. It was the village chief who stepped out of the black vehicle, a man known for his calm voice, his careful diplomacy, his way of keeping peace in the community for decades. He was respected, trusted, and believed to be a man who valued fairness above all things. Yet now, as he walked toward them, the rain soaked into his pressed shirt and flowed down his face like sweat, and his expression held nothing of the warmth people had always associated with him. The villagers watching from behind their windows fell into a deeper silence. Their belief in him had been steady for years, but belief is fragile when tested by shadows. He reached the three of them and stopped, his eyes passing across them slowly. First the young officer, trembling with defiance, then the stranger, calm and still, who seemed to be waiting for a signal only the chief could give. Finally, his gaze settled on May Rinna, not soft, not sympathetic, just quiet, as though he were looking at something he once understood but no longer recognized. "Rinna," he said, voice steady, "come with me. It is time for this to end peacefully." The young officer stepped forward, jaw clenched. "It will not end peacefully. You know what is happening. You know what is behind him." He pointed slightly toward the stranger. The chief did not deny it. His silence was the answer that stretched like a long shadow between them. May Rinna watched him closely. The chief's face held weariness deeper than exhaustion. It was a weariness of someone who had been carrying something heavy for many years, something he could not put down without consequence. The wind shifted, sending rain in slanted sheets. The sound of water hitting stone filled the courtyard. The chief spoke again, more softly. "None of this is your fault. You did what was right. You returned what you found. But this matter is larger than a lost suitcase, larger than money, larger than law. It began long before you touched it." His words were not a warning. They were an admission. The young officer shook his head fiercely. "You do not have to accept this. She does not have to accept this." The chief closed his eyes briefly, as if the weight of the world pressed upon his shoulders. Then he opened them again, and his voice held something that made the rain itself seem to pause in its rhythm. "If she refuses to come, others will pay for that refusal." May Rinna felt the meaning of those words settle inside her like cold stone. This was not a threat against her. It was a threat against everyone else. The stranger took a small step closer, his shoes silent on the wet earth. His eyes never changed expression. "We will leave now." He spoke as if the decision had already been made. But May Rinna did not move. She looked past them toward the village, the rice fields, the river bend, the houses lined with potted plants her neighbors tended each morning, children running barefoot on dusty paths. The world she had lived in her entire life. The world now watching her through slits in wooden shutters. She saw fear there, not for her, for themselves, for whatever invisible line she was being dragged across. The young officer touched her arm gently. His hand was shaking, but his voice remained steady. "I will take you away. Tonight, there are people who can help. But the moment you step into that car, your life will not belong to you anymore." May Rinna listened without turning her head. The rain dripped from her hair to her shoulders. Her shawl clung to her. Her feet remained still. The chief watched her with eyes that carried sorrow rather than threat. The stranger waited with the stillness of someone who had seen many endings before. The villagers continued to watch from behind the edges of curtains, holding their breath. She finally spoke, her voice calm and steady, though the world around her trembled. "There is one thing I must know." The stranger tilted his head slightly, acknowledging her right to speak. May Rinna faced the chief, her eyes sharp with resolve. "Who took the missing 100 million? The question cut through the courtyard like a blade. The young officer looked at her with shock. The chief looked at her with pain. The stranger looked at her with recognition. The rain fell harder. The chief's lips parted. He began to speak. He spoke only one name, a name that carried history, fear, and betrayal, a name that froze the courtyard in place, a name the villagers would pretend, later, they had never heard spoken aloud. Mayrinna's eyes widened, not with disbelief, but with the confirmation of something she had already begun to suspect. The young officer inhaled sharply, his entire body tensing. The stranger did not react, not even once. And before anyone could speak again, from the direction of the village square, a loud, steady sound began to approach. Not hurried, not panicked. A decision already moving toward them. And Mayrinna understood in that single moment that everything that was still hidden, everything that had remained in shadows, was now walking straight into the light. The sound that approached was not a vehicle this time, nor hurried footsteps. It was measured, heavy, like the slow beat of a drum announcing something inevitable. Everyone turned toward the village square. A man was walking toward them. His clothing was simple, a faded shirt, loose trousers, shoes worn from years of use. Not wealthy, not powerful in appearance, but the silence that followed him was absolute. The villagers who had been watching from doorways slowly closed their doors. Some lowered their heads. Some stepped back into shadows. It was not fear of what he would do. It was fear of what his presence meant. Mayrinna recognized him instantly. Her breath did not catch. Her heart did not falter. But her eyes shifted with a quiet realization. This was the person the chief had named. A man she had known since her youth. A man who once helped repair her roof when storms destroyed it 10 years ago. A man whose daughter she had carried on her back to the clinic when fever nearly took the child. A man who used to sit at the market and laugh loudly as though life owed him nothing and gave him everything. His name carried no title, no authority, no history of command. Yet here he was. And every person in the village knew that nothing was coincidence anymore. The young officer's hand curled into a fist. The stranger's posture remained unchanged. The chief lowered his gaze. The man's step stopped only a few feet from Mayrinna. Rainwater streamed down his face, collecting along his jaw, dripping from his chin. His expression was calm, too calm, like someone who had already crossed a point of no return long before the world noticed. Mayrinna spoke first, her voice quiet. "You took the money." He did not deny it. He did not confirm it. He simply looked at her. There was no guilt in his eyes. There was no pride either, only resignation. The young officer stepped forward, anger breaking through the surface. You knew she would return it. You knew she would be blamed. You used her to hide your own involvement. The man finally spoke. His voice was low, coarse, worn by sleepless nights. "No, I used her to stop them." Everyone froze. The stranger's eyes narrowed slightly, just enough to show interest. The chief exhaled slowly, as if a truth he had tried to bury had finally forced its way to air. Mayrinna stood still, letting his words settle around her like mist. The man looked at her directly. That money was never meant to reach the police. It was meant to disappear quietly. I took what I could to force their hand, to bring the ones behind all of this into the open. I knew when you returned it, they would not let it end. I knew this would happen. The rain softened to a distant hush. He continued, "You were the only one they could not touch first, because your hands are clean, because your life is known, because the village trusts you." Mayrinna's eyes held his. "And now," his throat tightened, "now the ones who hide behind shadows have stepped forward." The stranger turned his head slightly, watching him with cold precision. No emotion, only calculation. The chief looked at Mayrinna with sorrow that had no apology inside it, only inevitability. The young officer took a single step closer to her, protective, desperate. But before any of them could speak, the stranger finally moved. He reached into his coat, slowly, not with threat, with certainty. Mayrinna understood. The young officer understood. The chief had known from the beginning. The rain grew quiet. The world narrowed. Time thinned. The stranger withdrew something small. Not a weapon, not a phone, a single silver ring. He placed it in May Rinna's hand. His voice was low, steady, final. This is not about money anymore. It never was. It is about what that money was meant to do. The ring was cold, heavy. It carried a symbol etched inside the metal. Old, unmistakable. May Rinna recognized it. Her breath stilled, not in fear, in recognition of a truth that had waited years to return. The man who had taken the money stepped back, his face pale in the gray light of the rain-clouded sky. "They will come for all of us now," he said. But the stranger shook his head. "They are already here." Every villager watching felt the shift. The kind of shift one cannot name with words, only with a tightening in the chest. The rain stopped, the air stilled, and for the first time, May Rinna understood that everything leading to this moment, the suitcase, the accusation, the missing money, the warnings, had been nothing more than the opening of a door that had now fully opened. She closed her hand around the ring, and the world, in that quiet second, held its breath for what would happen next. The ring in May Rinna's hand felt heavier than anything she had ever held, not because of the metal, but because of what it meant. The symbol engraved inside it was faint, nearly worn out from time, but unmistakable. A circle broken by a single line through the center. She had seen it once before, years ago, on a letter her late father burned the moment he opened it, his hand shaking, his jaw tight. And after that day, he never once spoke of the people who sent it. Not once. Her fingers tightened around the ring, her pulse steady but slow. Like her heart understood the danger long before her mind could catch up. The man who had taken the money, Taryn, stood silent now, not defeated, not afraid, just tired. "I didn't steal for myself," he said, not to defend himself, but to clarify, to stop what was coming. But I was too late. They moved faster this time. The chief's eyes dropped to the ground, as though he could no longer look at the consequences of the secrets he had kept. The young officer stood near May Rinna, his hand hovering close to hers, not touching, but ready. Ready for what? He didn't know, but ready. The stranger remained still, a force that existed rather than acted. His presence alone commanded silence. The villagers stayed inside their houses, watching through cracks in doors and window slits. No one dared step out. No one dared speak. Everyone understood something enormous was happening, something that would not end here. May Rinna finally spoke, her voice calm. "You knew this day would come." Taryn nodded once. "They don't forget, May, and they don't forgive." The young officer's expression hardened. "Tell us what they want." But Taryn looked at May Rinna instead. "They want what your father protected, what he hid, what they think you know now." Her chest tightened, not in fear, but in realization. She had always known something lingered behind her father's silence, but she never thought it would return like this. The stranger took one small step forward. Every movement he made was precise, controlled, like someone trained to eliminate hesitation from his existence. His voice finally broke the stillness. "What was hidden will surface soon, whether you speak or not, whether you run or not. This village is merely the first ripple. The tide has already begun to rise." May Rinna did not step back. She did not tremble. She simply asked, "And what happens when the tide reaches its peak?" The stranger's gaze was unreadable. "That depends on who stands in its way." The young officer looked at May Rinna, waiting, not questioning her, not pushing her, just waiting. Because even now, in the middle of something none of them fully understood, she was the anchor, the one the village trusted, the one who did not break. May Rinna opened her hand and looked at the ring again. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, not in words, but in the heavy silence of the night. He burned that letter. "Some truths protect you only as long as you do not speak them." She closed her hand again. "I don't know where it is," she said quietly. Taryn exhaled sharply, not surprised, but defeated. The stranger did not react, at least not visibly. The chief finally spoke, his voice raw, You must leave the village. If you stay, they will turn these streets into a burial ground. But Rinna did not move. Her eyes shifted to the villagers hiding behind doors. Families, children, people she had grown up with. People who had seen her struggle, work, survive. If I leave, she said, her voice steady, they will suffer anyway. Running will not stop them. Hiding will not stop them. They have already marked this place. The young officer's jaw clenched. He knew she was right. The stranger took one step closer, close enough that only Rinna could hear his next words. Your father didn't hide the artifact. Rinna froze. The world seemed to stop breathing. The rainless air hung heavy around them. The stranger's voice was quiet, soft, but carrying a truth that split through the silence like lightning. He destroyed it. Taryn's eyes widened. The chief stumbled backward. The young officer inhaled sharply. Rinna did not blink, because deep inside her, in a place she never touched, never named, she had always suspected this. But the stranger was not finished. And when they learn the truth, he said softly, they will not come for what was lost. He looked directly into her eyes. They will come for the one who carries the memory of where it was destroyed. The world grew still, too still. Even the wind paused. Rinna breathed slowly, understanding the weight of what had always been hidden beneath her life. Her father had not protected a secret object. He had protected her. The village was no longer the battleground. She was. And just as the realization settled, just as the atmosphere thickened with what was about to unfold, a sound broke through the silence. Not footsteps, not voices, not a vehicle. A whistle, sharp, clear, carried on the wind from somewhere far beyond the village road. Taryn's face drained of color. The chief stepped back. The young officer reached for Rinna's arm. The stranger lifted his head, expression unchanged. Rinna did not move. She simply whispered, "They've arrived." But the camera in the viewer's mind does not cut yet. It lingers, holds, waits, because something is about to enter, something just beyond the edge of sight. But we do not show it yet. We just leave them waiting, breathing in that tension, wondering, who just whistled? How close are they? What happens now? And the scene does not end. It simply stops right there on the brink of the next step, just enough to make the audience lean forward, just enough to make them stay. The whistle did not repeat. It was a single sound, but it left a mark in the air, like a blade drawn slowly across the skin of silence. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it, but no one moved. The village seemed to hold its breath. A dog somewhere far beyond the houses let out a short, broken bark, then silence again. Taryn pressed his hand against his chest, steadying his breath. The chief stepped back until his boots reached the wooden steps of the shrine, his eyes wide and unfocused. The young officer remained beside Rinna, but his hand trembled, just enough that the movement caught her eye. Only the stranger stood motionless, as if he had known the whistle would come, as if he had been counting the quiet seconds leading to it. Rinna did not turn her head. She did not try to search for the source. Her gaze remained on the road ahead, the road empty right now, but heavy with something unseen. The whistle was a signal, a message, not for the villagers, not for the chief, not even for the stranger. It was for her. Taryn spoke first, but his voice was barely more than a whisper. They sent a caller. If he is here, the rest are already near. The chief swallowed slowly, his throat tight. We have no time. We must evacuate. The stranger raised one hand, not to threaten, but to silence. We do not move. Not yet. The chief froze mid-breath. The stranger looked at Rinna, his voice calm. They will watch first. They will look for hesitation. They will wait for the smallest sign of fear. If you run now, the hunt will begin. And once it begins, it will not stop. The young officer finally spoke, his tone unsteady but determined. Then what do? We stay where we are, the stranger replied, and we wait for the one who steps forward. The villagers behind their doors remained completely still. No child cried. No voice whispered. Every person understood that the village had crossed into something that no ordinary fear could explain. May Rinna's fingers brushed the ring in her hand again. The metal felt colder now, sharper, as if it were remembering something her memory had not yet reached. She could feel her heartbeat. Slow, steady, not calm but controlled. Her father had taught her that. Fear is not the enemy. Losing yourself to it is. The young officer leaned closer to her, speaking quietly so only she could hear. Tell me everything. Whatever you remember. Every detail. But May Rinna shook her head once. I remember nothing clearly. Only sensations. Shadows. A place near a river. A red cloth. And fire. Always fire. The officer's breath caught. Fire is how he destroyed it, Taryn said softly, confirming what May Rinna already knew without knowing how she knew it. The stranger's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in study. You remember more than you think. And they know that. That is why they sent the caller, not the hunters. The officer looked confused. What is the difference? The stranger turned his head slightly. His shadow stretched across the shrine steps. The caller announces the arrival. The hunters erase the witnesses. And the keeper decides who must be taken. The chief's knees weakened slightly, his hand gripping the wooden railing behind him. The keeper, he repeated. That means their leader is here? The stranger did not answer, which was answer enough. May Rinna felt something shift in the air. A change subtle but undeniable, like the atmosphere itself had grown heavier, pressing down on the lungs. She could sense movement now. Not footsteps, not voices, but presence. Something approached without being seen. The road remained empty. No figures in the distance. No silhouettes. No flicker of motion. But the air told the truth. The caller was close. The stranger tilted his head slightly, his eyes focusing on a point far beyond the visible path. His voice dropped, soft in a whisper, yet somehow every ear heard it. He is here. The chief's breath stopped. The officer tensed. Taryn closed his eyes. May Rinna did not move. Her father's teachings lived not in her memory, but in her body. Her shoulders lowered. Her breath deepened. Her pulse steadied. The stranger stepped aside, not in weakness, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement. The caller was not approaching him. He was approaching her. And at last, at the far edge of the road, something appeared. Not a figure, not at first. A simple red thread, trailing along the ground, as if carried by an invisible hand. The wind did not move it. The dust did not cling to it. It lay across the path like a line drawn between two worlds. May Rinna stared at it. Her fingers tightened around the ring, and for a moment, the pattern engraved on its surface seemed to pulse under her skin. Taryn whispered, "You remember that, do you not?" But May Rinna did not answer, because she did. She remembered a night of fire, a river reflecting orange light, and a figure holding a thread just like this one, a thread that chose who would live. The red thread on the ground began to pull forward, slowly, as if being reeled in by something hidden just beyond the bend of the road. Every person present felt the shift. The arrival was no longer questioned. The caller was coming into view, and the story holds right there, at the breath before the reveal, where the audience leans closer, waiting to see who appears. But the figure does not step into view just yet. The moment remains suspended, right at the edge of the unseen, right where anticipation becomes silence. The red thread slid across the dirt like it was alive. Its movement was slow, deliberate, patient, almost graceful. No wind pushed it. No hand pulled it. It simply traveled forward, as though the ground itself carried it. May Rinna did not step back. Her feet felt rooted in the earth. The world seemed to narrow around her, the sounds of distant birds, rustling leaves, and shifting branches fading away until it was only the thread and the silence around it. The villagers still hiding behind their doors felt it too, a silence, so deep it did not feel empty. It felt aware. The young officer reached for May Rinna again, his fingertips nearly brushing her sleeve, but he stopped. There was something in her posture, a quiet certainty, a resolve he could not understand but could feel. Taryn's voice was restrained. almost unrecognizable. The caller always announces with the thread. It is his way of tracing the one who remembers. Once the thread chooses where to stop, there is no stepping away from it. The chief's lips parted, his voice barely a breath. So the thread is coming for her. The stranger did not answer. His gaze was fixed on Rinna, observing her, confirming something only he understood. The thread drew closer. It reached the center of the open space where Rinna stood, and it stopped completely, as if the world itself had paused at that one point. The young officer swallowed. What happens now? No one responded. The red thread lifted. Not much, only by the width of a coin, as if an invisible hand raised it in greeting. Rinna exhaled slowly, and her voice came steady, quiet, but unshaken. Show yourself. For a moment, nothing, just the stillness of a village holding every breath it had. Then a sound emerged, not a footstep, not a voice, but something more subtle. The shift of weight, the impact of presence. A figure stood at the far curve of the road, where the forest shadows met the sunlight, but his face could not be seen. The light behind him made him appear nothing more than a silhouette, tall and unmoving. The villagers behind their shutters did not blink. Some prayed quietly. Some gripped their children's hands. The caller did not move forward. He simply watched. The stranger finally spoke, his expression unreadable. He will not step closer until she acknowledges the bond. The thread is not a signal of arrival. It is an invitation. Rinna's heart beat once, deep and steady. Not quick, not panicked. A beat grounded in truth. She bent down slowly, her hand reaching toward the red thread. The young officer's breath caught. "Do not touch it," he whispered. But Rinna was already closing the gap between her hand and the thread. Before her fingers could reach it, the thread shifted again, curling upward, forming a single loop, a symbol, a mark, the same mark engraved inside the ring she held, the broken circle, the cut line, her father's mark. Every memory that had been lost in time, buried under years of silence, pressed against her chest. Not yet clear, but close, very close. Taryn's voice trembled. He marked you with memory, not words. That is why you do not recall clearly. He meant for the truth to return only when they came for it. Rinna lifted her eyes to the silhouette on the road. His stillness was not passive. It was intentional, like a predator waiting for acknowledgement before it stepped into its prey's world. The chief whispered sharply. If she accepts the thread, they claim her. The stranger countered calmly. If she rejects it, they claim the village. The choice was no choice at all. Rinna's hand hovered again, closer this time, the space between her skin and the thread so small that even a breath could bridge it. The young officer's voice was low, roughened by emotion he did not mean to reveal. You do not have to carry this alone. Rinna did not look away from the thread. Her voice was steady. I have always carried it. I just did not know its shape. Her hand descended, but before her fingers touched the thread, something new happened. Another sound, not the whistle from before, not the quiet shift of the caller. A door opened. A single, hesitant creak from one of the houses. Every head turned. A child stepped outside. Small, barefoot, holding a faded cloth doll. Her eyes were wide, not with fear but recognition, as if she had seen the red thread before in some dream or memory not her own. Her mother reached out from inside the house, whispering her name, but the child did not return. She looked directly at Rinna, then at the caller, then at the thread. Her lips parted, forming a small, soft word that only Rinna heard. You remember. And in that moment, in that precise, fragile second, everything shifted, not in action, not in movement, but in meaning. The thread had not chosen Rinna alone. It had chosen the village, every life, every history, every secret generations deep. The truth was no longer something she carried alone. The caller remained in shadow. The thread waited. The villagers held their breath. The moment stretched long, as though the air itself refused to let the next second arrive. Right at the brink, right before a decision, right where the story must hold, where the audience waits for the hand to touch the thread, but the hand does not move yet. The moment hangs, alive, unresolved, and heavy with what comes next. The red thread lay suspended between Mayrina and the waiting figure, its color bright against the earth. The child's whispered words lingered in the air, carrying a truth that had been buried longer than anyone here had lived. Mayrina looked at the girl, at the innocence in her eyes, untouched by history yet already tied to it. Something quiet and steady settled in Mayrina's chest. Not fear, recognition. She reached down and gently lifted the thread into her palm. It did not burn. It did not tighten. It simply rested there, soft as silk, warm as breath. The silhouette on the road stepped forward. With each step, his form grew clearer. His clothing was simple, his posture composed, his face calm, neither cruel nor kind. When he stopped a short distance from Mayrina, the village remained silent. His voice was quiet, and the tone held no triumph. Your father's choice was his own. The burden that followed was never meant to be yours. Mayrina met his gaze without lowering her own. And yet I carry it. The caller nodded once. Now you decide how it ends. The young officer braced himself, ready to protect her, but Mayrina raised her hand slightly, not to silence him, but to reassure him. She studied the thread in her palm. She saw her father burning the letter. She saw the river, the fire, the ashes carried downstream. She saw the night where the artifacts ceased to exist. But she saw something else too, the way he looked at her, not in fear of what pursued them, but in hope of what she could become. Mayrina closed her hand around the thread. I choose to end this here. The caller lowered his gaze in acknowledgement, not defeat, not submission, recognition. The memory is yours. The story remains with you, and the circle closes. The thread dissolved into fine red dust, carried upward as though rising into air rather than falling to the ground. Terran let out a long breath. The chief bowed his head. The villagers behind the doors began to step outside, slowly, carefully, as though waking from a long-held dream. The child with the cloth doll walked to Mayrina's side and held her hand. Mayrina squeezed it gently. The caller turned to leave. But before he stepped back toward the road, he looked at Mayrina one last time. Peace is not the absence of history. It is the choice to no longer allow the past to govern the living. She nodded. He disappeared down the road, his steps soundless, leaving no trace behind. The village exhaled together, one long breath shared among every person who had witnessed the moment. The young officer stepped forward, his voice low. It is over. Mayrina watched the direction where the caller had gone. No, she said softly. Not over, but no longer feared. The villagers gathered. The tension that once held the air taut now released into something gentler, though not entirely light. Life would continue, but the weight that once hung over them had shifted. Not erased, never erased, but transformed. Mayrina looked at the shrine, the houses, the road, the people. She did not feel alone. The child held her hand a little tighter. And the story closed not with suspense, nor with disaster, nor with triumph, but with quiet understanding. A line once drawn in fear, now rested in peace. The thread had finished its path.